Hey there, all you beautiful Broadway babies! Welcome back to Broadway by Ghostlight. I'm Mark Benani, and this is episode 56 of Broadway Jeopardy! Shout out to all my fellow Americans out there attempting to celebrate the 4th of July this week while also grappling with the fact that the country is, well, we're going through it, let's say. But a theme's a theme, so this week we're looking at all things America. If you love musical theater, interesting trivia, and rudimentary video editing, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. I've got 26 all-American clues burning a hole in my pocket, so let's get right to this week's game. This is Broadway Jeopardy! Looking at the categories for this week, we start off as always with last week's Final Jeopardy category, which is Murica. Looking at some show tunes with the word America or American in the title. That's followed by George M. Cohan, fill in the blanks. Here we're looking at one of the most patriotic Broadway songsmiths of all time, George M. Cohan. I'll give you a set of his lyrics and you fill in the missing words. Don't worry, it's easier than it sounds. Then we have 1776. This category is all about the 1969 musical by Sherman Edwards and Peter Stone, dramatizing the events leading up to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's followed by Around the US, looking at different musicals with a US city in its title. And last but certainly not least, we have Fight the System. Here we're looking at some real-life political activists who have been featured as characters in various plays and musicals. And of course, we end with the Final Jeopardy round, so make sure and keep track of your scores if you want, so you can wager some or all of it on that final clue. We begin, of course, with the $200 round, or the overture round as we call it here, where the questions should be on the easier side of things before I ratchet up the obscurity in the later rounds. Kicking things off with the Murica category, your first $200 clue is: this popular punk rock band made the leap to Broadway with the musical American Idiot, based on their album of the same name. Who is Green Day? Green Day released their album American Idiot in 2004 to critical and financial success, and is now considered one of the greatest rock albums of all time. The musical, conceived and directed by Michael Mayer, opened at Broadway in 2010, starring John Gallagher Jr., Stark Sands, and Michael Esper. I managed the merch for American Idiot for a while, and I loved that show dearly. I watched it, I don't know, at least 50 times. Actually, in the documentary about the show Broadway Idiot, which was coincidentally my nickname in school, if you pause the documentary at just the right moment, hey, that's me and my wife! My 15 milliseconds of fame. Moving on to the George M. Cohan fill in the blanks category, your next $200 clue is: I am a Yankee Doodle dandy, a Yankee Doodle do or die, a real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on blank, 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 blank. What is the 4th of July? The ultra-patriotic George M. Cohan and his performing family always insisted that George Cohan himself was born on the 4th of July. But in reality, he came a day early, being born on the 3rd of July.
I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, Yankee Doodle do or die.
Let's check out the musical 1776 with the $200 clue. The opening number to the musical has the members of the First Continental Congress telling the exasperating John Adams to do this. What is Sit Down? The musical's acclaimed book writer Peter Stone felt that the opening number, Sit Down, John, was key in setting the tone and expectations for the audience. Saying, quote, the minute you heard Sit Down, John, you knew what the whole show was. You knew immediately that John Adams and the others were not going to be treated as gods or cardboard characters chopping down cherry trees and flying kites with strings on them. Continuing to say that it had this very affectionate familiarity and it wasn't reverential in any way. Pack your bags as we head around the US with the $200 clue. This film-based musical saw Tony Danza as wealthy gambler Tommy Corman, who comes between an engaged couple who planned on spending their honeymoon in this city. What is Las Vegas? Honeymoon in Vegas, based on the 1992 film of the same name, starred Tony Danza as the clue mentioned, as well as Rob McClure as Jack and Bryn O'Malley as his fiancée, Betsy. The musical received a great review from the New York Times critic Ben Brantley, who called the show, quote, a real live, old-fashioned, deeply satisfying Broadway musical in a way few new shows are anymore. He even compared the score by Jason Robert Brown to Rodgers and Hammerstein. Whoa. Most of the other reviews weren't quite as loving as the New York Times, however. Honeymoon in Vegas opened in January 2015 after an extensive 2-month preview period and closed in April of the same year. In finishing up the overture round in the Fight the System category, your last $200 clue is: real-life feminist activist Betty Friedan was Cinderella's fairy godmother in Once Upon a One More Time, a jukebox musical using the songs of this pop icon. Who is Britney Spears? In Once Upon a One More Time, Cinderella meets the original fairy godmother, or OFG as she's called, who is said to have been banished from Story's End, the place where all the fairy tale figures live. Turns out the fairy godmother was instead sent to the real world, specifically Flatbush in Brooklyn. The OFG gives Cinderella a copy of The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, which opens Cinderella's eyes and changes her forever. And later on, we learn that OFG and Betty Friedan are one and the same. I hope you all hit that first round one more time. Let's move on to the only slightly harder $400 round now. Circling back to Murica, your first $400 clue is: religious leader Joseph Smith's story is told in the song All American Prophet in this long-running musical comedy. What is the Book of Mormon? The hilarious song from the Book of Mormon tells a condensed version of the story of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon religion. Two of the musical's authors, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, had previously adapted the story of Joseph Smith on an iconic and controversial episode of their long-running adult cartoon, South Park.
Joseph Smith was called a prophet, dum 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 dum. He started the Mormon religion, dum 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 dum.
There goes that kooky Joseph Smith. You know, he claims he spoke with God and Jesus.
Well, how do you know he didn't?
Dum 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 dum.
Your next chance to fill in the blanks from George M. Cohan for $400 is: over there, send the word over there, that the blank are coming. What are Yanks? The song Over There was written by George M. Cohan in 1917, the day after the US officially entered World War I. It was used to galvanize America's young men to sign up for active duty. Over There became a huge hit, selling over 2 million copies of its sheet music. The song regained its massive popularity again during World War II. The $400 clue in the 1776 category is: in Martha Jefferson's subtly sensual solo, she sings of her love for how her husband plays this instrument. What is the violin? In the show, John Adams and Benjamin Franklin are desperate for Thomas Jefferson to get to work on writing the Declaration of Independence, but the mopey Jefferson hasn't seen his wife in 6 months and can't focus on anything else. John Adams, saying that the only way to solve their problem is to solve Jefferson's, send for Martha, Thomas's wife, and upon meeting her, Adams and Franklin ask how the usually uncommunicative Jefferson wooed her, and she tells them it's the way he plays his violin.
He plays the violin, he tucks it right under his chin, and he bows, oh he bows.
Looking at an obvious musical in the Around the US category gives us the $400 clue. We of course know what city the musical Chicago takes place in, but thanks to the name of the jail Roxy Hart finds herself in, we also know that this is the county the show takes place in. What is Cook County? Yes, Roxy, Velma, and the rest of the merry murderesses are housed in the Cook County Jail in the jazzy musical. Cook County is actually the biggest county in the state of Illinois, with 40% of all residents said to live there. Not only that, Cook County is the second biggest county in all of America after Los Angeles County. And the final $400 clue in the Fight the System category is... On Broadway, the play The Mountaintop by Katori Hall starred Samuel L. Jackson as this revered leader of the civil rights movement on the eve of his assassination. Who is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? The Mountaintop by Katori Hall, which opened on Broadway in 2011, reimagines Dr. King's last night on Earth before he's assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee in his motel. Besides Samuel L. Jackson, who was making his Broadway debut as Dr. King, the powerful play also starred Angela Bassett as Carrie Mae, a mysterious maid at the motel.
I heard you was preaching everybody the same. Negro folk, white folk, we all alike.
Well, at the most human level, we are all the same.
Well, one thing we all got in common.
We scared, Cammy. We all scared. We're scared of each other, scared of ourselves. They just scared. Scared of losing something they've known their whole lives.
Barging right into the $600 round now like a true American, your first $600 clue in the Murica category is... In America from West Side Story, the lyric "Everything free in America" is followed by this line. What is For a Small Fee in America? The original version of the song America, sung by Anita and her fellow females, is very much a put-down of Puerto Rico. So when Puerto Rican-born Rita Moreno was cast in the role of Anita for the 1961 film version, she insisted that the lyrics be updated, and they were, belittling the Caribbean island a little less while also taking more pointed slights at America, like in the lines,
Life is alright in America.
If you're all white in America.
The $600 clue in the George M. Cohan fill-in-the-blanks category is... Give my regards to Broadway, remember me to blank blank. What is Herald Square? Like Yankee Doodle Boy, the song from the first clue, Give My Regards to Broadway is another hit song from the musical Little Johnny Jones from 1904. The musical is about a brash, patriotic horse jockey who travels to England to compete in the English Derby. After he loses the race, Johnny is accused of throwing it intentionally for profit. Johnny stays in London to clear his name, but as the rest of his friends are returning to America, he tells them all to give his regards to Broadway.
Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square.
Let's check in on the Founding Fathers in the 1776 category with the $600 clue. Southern delegate Edward Rutledge points out the hypocrisy of the anti-slave colonies benefiting from the slave trade in the haunting song Molasses to This. What is rum? In Molasses to Rum, Edward Rutledge is specifically referring to the triangle trade, which depended heavily on slaves to harvest the sugarcane made for making molasses, which in turn is used to make rum. The song is powerful, dark, and I think intentionally uncomfortable.
Oh, haven't you heard, Mr. Adams?
Clink, clink. Molasses to rum to slaves. Oh, what a beautiful waltz.
Sticking with some heavy subject matter with the $600 clue in the Around the US category, we have... This Kander and M musical is about a real-life group of 9 young black men who were wrongfully accused of assaulting 2 white women in 1931. What is the Scottsboro Boys? The sad and infuriating history of the 9 young black men from Scottsboro, Alabama, who were falsely accused of heinous crimes in 1931, is a landmark case when it comes to the history of legal injustice in America. One of the last new musicals with a score by John Kander and Fred Ebb, the team, along with their librettist David Thompson, made the bold and controversial choice to present the Scottsboro Boys in the style and traditions of a minstrel show. And sticking it to the man with the Fight the System category and the $600 clue. Among the real-life figures featured in this fictional musical is anarchist political activist Emma Goldman, who was originally played on Broadway by Judy Kaye. What is ragtime? Emma Goldman was one of the few real-life characters in ragtime who is interwoven into all three main stories in the musical. In particular, she inspires Mother's younger brother, who, in the song The Night That Goldman Spoke in Union Square, imagines the anarchist activist speaking directly to him. As the clue mentioned, two-time Tony winner Judy Kaye played the role originally on Broadway. Ragtime is set to be revived this fall in a very exciting production at Lincoln Center, and playing Emma Goldman this time will be two-time Tony winner Shayna Taub of Suffs, which is perfect casting. It's time, my friends, to crank up that difficulty level a notch or two with the $800 round now. But before we do, if you're enjoying this week's game, please hit that little like button for me right now. It just takes a second to click that button, or if you're watching this on a TV like I do, swipe up on your remote to find where to hit that like button. It really helps with these videos getting shown to more fine folks like yourselves, but also makes me feel like I'm America's sweetheart. Thank you all, I truly do appreciate it. Okay, marching on to the $800 round. Back again at the Murica category, the $800 clue there is: in this musical by Leslie Bricusse and Anthony Newley, Little Chap travels the world meeting different women, including the all-American Ginny. What is Stop the World, I Wanna Get Off? The musical by Leslie Bricusse and Anthony Newley first opened in London in 1961, starring Newley as Little Chap, with Anna Quayle playing all the women in his life. The musical transferred to Broadway a year later with its stars intact. The odd show follows the everyman character of Little Chap from birth all the way to death as he strives for wealth and success, ultimately realizing that the real value of life is not material things, but instead love. The musical had a Lincoln Center revival in 1978 starring Sammy Davis Jr. as Little Chap, which was filmed for television and retitled as Sammy Stops the World. Let's see if you can fill in the blanks again of this George M. Cohan song with the $800 clue. You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever blank blank may you wave. What is In Peace? The song You're a Grand Old Flag is from Cohan's musical George Washington Jr. from 1906, and it was the first song from a musical to sell over 1 million copies of its sheet music. The title of the patriotic song was originally You're a Grand Old Rag. Cohan had met a Civil War veteran who carried an old tattered flag with him and remarked to the songwriter that, quote, she's a grand old rag. But after countless people objected to the US flag being called a rag in the song, Cohan eventually changed the lyric to flag. In the 1776 category, we have a daily double. Remember, here on Broadway Jeopardy, answer part 1 of the clue, you get the $800. Answer the slightly more difficult part 2, and you double it to $1,600. Okay, your doubled up clue in the 1776 category is: John Adams begs his wife Abigail to organize the local women to make this for the Continental Army, an essential ingredient for gunpowder. For double points, Abigail says she will send what John asks for, if in return, he will send the women these. What is saltpeter is the answer to part 1, and what are pins is the answer to part 2. During the song Piddle, Twiddle, and Resolve, John Adams and his wife Abigail communicate through letters. The pair bicker, with a wink, about John's request for Abigail to rally the other women to make saltpeter for the Continental Army. Abigail states that the women of Massachusetts will do no such thing until they are provided with sewing pins, which have become extremely scarce in wartime.
Pins, madam, saltpeter.
Pins.
Saltpeter.
Pins.
Saltpeter.
Pins.
Saltpeter.
Pins.
Peter.
Pins.
Peter.
Pins.
Peter.
Pins.
Peter.
Pins.
The $800 clue in the Around the US category is: This 2004 musical's title character is a young singer named for her estranged father's hometown, who must battle the wicked Miss Paradise in a battle of the divas. What is Brooklyn? Brooklyn the musical starred Tony winner Clivant Derricks, Ramona Keller, Karen Olivo, and Eden Espinosa in the title role of Brooklyn. The best remembered song from the Belcher Face-Off score has to be the song Once Upon a Time. And looking at another important figure in the Fight the System category gives us the $800 clue. In the musical Suffs, Tony winner Nikki M. James portrayed this important woman, an activist for African American and women's rights, who is also a founding member of the NAACP. Who is Ida B. Wells? Born into slavery, Ida B. Wells started as an investigative journalist who documented the lynchings of innocent black men, showing the true horrors and brutality of the lynchings while also disproving the narrative that the lynchings were only for men who committed crimes. Later in life, as the clue stated, she became an important early leader in the civil rights movement, advocating for African American equality, especially that of women. We've reached that point now, my friends. The big show, the main event, it's the $1,000 round. Play me that dramatic music. Best of luck, players. Ignoring several travel advisories and coming back to America one last time gives us the $1,000 clue. This baffling, lightning-fast flop musical about the infamous Joseph McCarthy, who ran the communist witch hunt in the 1950s, contained the song Almighty American. What is Senator Joe is the right response. That was a super hard one for sure, unless of course you've watched my video on 5 bonkers Broadway bombs too crazy to last. Hint, hint, wink, wink. As the clue stated, Senator Joe is about Joseph McCarthy, and it contained wild scenes, like acclaimed journalist Edward R. Murrow taking audiences on a tour of McCarthy's alcohol-damaged liver, with ensemble members playing roles like Fatty Deposit and Dancing Enzymes.
Choices.
Is it any surprise that not only did the musical not make it to opening night, but in fact only lasted 3 preview performances? Yikes. The only thing more crazy than what was happening on stage was what was happening off stage, which ended with the musical's producer being arrested for grand larceny. It's a wild story that you can hear all about in the Broadway Bombs video I mentioned earlier. The $1,000 clue in the George M. Cohan fill in the blanks category is only blank blank from Broadway. Think of the change it brings. What is 45 Minutes? The song in question was the title tune from Cohan's 1906 musical 45 Minutes from Broadway. The song's title refers to the 45-minute train ride from New Rochelle, New York to Manhattan. The finale clue in the 1776 category for $1,000 is every time a vote on the issue of independence is called, this is the soon-to-be state that always abstains courteously. What is New York? In the lead up to the actual signing of the Declaration of Independence, the delegates from New York had not yet received instructions from the home government on how to vote, and therefore had no choice but to abstain courteously. It actually wasn't until July 9th, 1776 that the New York delegates were finally given authorization to vote in favor of independence, and their signatures were added to the famous document. Our last loop around the US brings us the $1,000 clue. This 1946 musical, with a score by Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer, contains the songs Legalize My Name, Any Place I Hang My Hat Is Home, and Come Rain or Come Shine. What is St. Louis Woman? The musical originally starred Pearl Bailey, Rex Ingram, and the Nicholas Brothers. The idea for creating the show, based on the novel God Sends Sundays by Arna Botemps, was for it to be a vehicle for Lena Horne. But after the NAACP criticized the script, Lena Horne rejected the show, saying she had no intention of playing a, quote, flashy lady of easy virtue. The musical also received protests from African Americans outside the theater during performances, which hurt ticket sales. Encore's presented St. Louis Woman in 1998, starring Vanessa Williams, a recording of which I'm a big fan of. And the curtain call clue in the Fight the System category for $1,000 is... This musical about activist and entrepreneur Victoria Woodhull, the first woman to run for president, closed on its opening night. What is Onward Victoria? That was a super hard one. I'm sure only one of you got that one. You know who you are. Victoria Woodhull was a fascinating figure from American history. She, along with her sister, were the first women to own and operate a brokerage house, which earned the pair millions of dollars. She was also the first woman to run for president, as the clue stated, which she did on the platform of equality of sexes and free love. So while it's not surprising that someone attempted to make her life into a musical, it is fairly surprising that there have been 3 attempts at a musical of Woodhull's life, and all of them somewhat disasters. One to have starred Carol Channing called Vote for Vicky never got off the ground. Another about the Woodhull sisters titled Winner Takes All closed on the road. And then there's Onward Victoria, which after 32 previews closed on its opening night. And now we've reached the final Jeopardy round, y'all. Time to tally up the scores and decide how confident you feel wagering in the category. The British are coming. Yes, history repeating itself as we're looking at some British musicals that have played Broadway. Okay, has everyone made their wagers? Sam? Colby? Lily? Okay, here is your final clue. This 1937 British musical, which was successfully revived in the West End in 1985 before finally reaching Broadway in 1986, features the song The Lambeth Walk. What is Me and My Girl? Me and My Girl is about Bill Snipson, an unpolished Cockney gentleman from the town of Lambeth, who finds out that he is the long-lost heir to the earldom of Hereford. The big song to come from the show was The Lambeth Walk, a raucous dance number that started a dance craze in England in the 1930s. The hit 1980s revival of the show starred Robert Lindsay, both in England and America, earning him the Olivier and the Tony for the roles. Playing Sally, Bill's down-to-earth girlfriend in the West End revival, was none other than Emma Thompson, her big breakout role. And that's this week's game! How did you all make out this week? Are you proud to be an American musical theater fan? Or do you need to seek asylum somewhere else? Be sure to let me know your scores in the comments. I love hearing from you guys and seeing how you did. Of course, my favorite people, not just in America, but the world, are those firecrackers over on my Patreon. You guys light up my night sky. If you want to be as awesome like them and help support the channel, you can check out my Patreon via the link in the video description, where there's also a link to my merch shop with different theatery designs there, including the one I wore last week, which is a line from Schmigadoon. I had some people inquiring in the comments about it. You can find me outside of YouTube on Instagram or Blue Sky. I will be back next week with episode 57, but until then, I'm Mark Benani. This is Broadway by Ghostlight. Thanks for playing.